So hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depends upon the time zone you are in. So thank you so much for being here with us today. My name is Deepthi Goguri and I am going to present on the topic SQL Server Internals and Architecture. So a little bit about me. I'm a database administrator with 7 years of experience in managing SQL Server and databases. I'm a Microsoft certified solution expert. I did my master's in computer technology at Eastern Illinois University. I recently started blogging for dbanuggets.com. That's my website. And you can contact me on Twitter at dbanuggets. That's my user ID. And that's my email address. If you have any questions regarding this session, please do not hesitate to contact me on Twitter, or you can also email me. So what are we going to discuss in this session? We are going to go through the overview of ACID properties of transaction with a simple example. And we are going to discuss about the SQL Server memory architecture and the types of the cache we have in the SQL Server. We are going to go in deep on plan cache and the buffer pool and how the cache will be managed inside the SQL Server. And we are going to discuss about the life cycle of the query for the select as well as for the insert statements. And we are also going to talk about the components of SQL engine, which compose of relational engine as well as the storage engine. So internals, why we actually care. Many DBAs and developers, they work with SQL Server on daily basis, but might not exactly understand what happens behind the scenes when we submit a query. So knowing this information will help you understand how queries are processed at each stage inside the SQL engine. It also helps you in identifying the performance issues very quickly and to fix them efficiently. And it will build you the confidence when managing the database engine and the databases. It will also help you while convincing your coworkers or your managers of why they have to take your ideas seriously. Last but not least, we all work with SQL Server every day. So the more you know about the internals, the better you can manage the SQL engine as well as the databases. So let's start with the ACID properties of transactions. Every major relational engine, it might be SQL Server or Oracle or PostgreSQL, all these relational engines should satisfy the ACID properties of transactions. So what is this ACID? A stands for atomicity. The atomic meaning a single unit of work. A transaction can contain one operation or it can contain multiple operations in a single transaction. So all the operations in the single transaction should either complete successfully or none of them. Like for example, I have a stored procedure which have an update statement as well as the insert statement in it. When I execute the stored procedure, it should execute both the operations in the transaction successfully. If the updates fails and if the insert succeeds, then the SQL Server should go ahead and roll back the entire transaction. So that is atomicity. C stands for consistency. The data inside the database should be consistent before beginning the transaction and after completing the transaction. So for example, if I'm updating a statement, if I'm updating a table with a simple update statement, and if suddenly something happens and if system went down and if we have to restart the server, then once we restart the server, all the uncommitted transactions should be rolled back, making the data in the consistent state. So that is consistency. I stands for isolation. No matter how many concurrent transactions happens at the same time, each and every transaction should be independent of each other and should not interfere with any other transaction. For example, I'm doing the modification statement in one transaction. None of the other modification statements on any other statement should interfere with my transaction. So that is the isolation. And D stands for durability. If a transaction is successfully completed and all the data is already made to the database, the changes that are made to the database should be persistent. That means like if the server has to restart or if the system went down and we restarted the server, then all the changes that are committed to the database should be persisted and there should not be any data loss. So what components of the SQL engine will ensure the ACID property? The atomicity is really easy to be ensured and it is taken care by the parse component of relational engine. The consistency is also very easy to be ensured. It is taken care by the parser and binder component of the relational engine. And if the atomicity, isolation, and the durability properties are ensured, the consistency will be automatically ensured. The isolation is all about the logging mechanism. It is taken care by the log manager inside the storage engine. The durability is the most toughest of all. It is taken care by the transaction log inside the storage engine. So let's talk about a simple example which is ensured by the ACID property. For example, I have a balance of $500 in my account, and I wanted to send $100 from my account, which is account 1, to my friend's account, which is account 2. So I can do this in a different ways, right? But in my example, I wanted to use the mobile application of my bank. I'm using my phone to do that by using a mobile application. So when I started the transaction, on the back end, SQL Server will begin the transaction, and it will go ahead and update my account by deducting $100 from my balance, where ID is 1 and the balance is greater than 100. So it will make it as $400. And suddenly I see this on my mobile screen. I'm logged out of the application and I see this alert saying the facility is temporarily unavailable. So what has happened? I'm in the middle of the transaction and I don't know if I lost my $100. I'm not going to leave the bank people. And I don't know if my friend has got the $100 to her account. So I called her and asked if she received any money. She said no. So I immediately called the bank customer service and asked if what happened to my transaction. So they said there is a severe thunderstorm and some of the servers went down and they already restarted it. So now think what should happen according to the ACID property of transaction. I am in the middle of transaction. My transaction is not completed. So let's see what will happen once the SQL Server restarts. So once the SQL Server restarts, the uncommitted transaction are rolled back. My transaction is uncommitted. So my transaction is rolled back and my balance will be reflected $500, which is my initial amount, which I have before beginning the transaction. So all the ACID properties of transactions are ensured here. As atomicity is ensured by rolling back the uncommitted transaction, and consistency is ensured by reflecting the $500 in my balance, which is the initial amount before beginning the transaction. That means the data is consistent, right? So isolation, did you observe like when SQL Server is updating my account by deducting $100, none of the other transactions were interfering with my transaction. So isolation is also ensured. Now durability. Durability is also ensured by making my data durable. I did not lose my $100, I have it. And my transaction is completely rolled back and transaction log helped making this happen. So let's start with SQL Server memory architecture. So the SQL Server engine is a Windows program, and it will use the Windows APIs to allocate the memory to the SQL Server. So there are many types of components of memory inside the SQL Server. So basically, we are going to look in detail of the major components of memory, which are the plan cache and the buffer pool in this session. But there are also other memory components inside the SQL Server. So what holds in plan cache? Plan cache basically holds the store procedures, query plans, etc. The buffer pool stores the 8 KB data pages and index pages. There are other types of caches and pools, and such as like log cache, token and perm user store cache. So what this cache means, it stores the user permissions on the objects. There is something known as column store cache. It will usually store the column store indexes. And all these components, which you see in the blue color, are caches. These are special because they are easily to be expanded and also easily to be shrinked when there is a memory pressure. So they are easily shrinked because they have a backing up system in it. Now what I mean by that is like plan cache, the query text of the stored procedures with the plan cache holds are stored inside the system tables. in the buffer pool, the data pages which the buffer pool stores, all these data pages are stored inside the database files on the disk. And in the other caches, like other caches and pools, like the log cache, it is stored on the disk as the transaction log. And the column store is also, and the column store indexes are also compressed and they are stored in the disk subsystem. So all these caches which are in the blue color, all these caches are very easily to be cleared out when there is a memory pressure. But what about the fixed memory, which is in the green color? The fixed memory, it is not at all easy for the SQL Server to be cleared out or to be compressed, because whenever something is using that fixed memory, it cannot be cleared out or it cannot be shrinked. So what the fixed memory holds? Fixed memory holds the connections to the SQL Server. For example, the connections to the memory grants that are used for the hash and the sorts. Those kind of connections are used in this fixed memory. Now, why is this? Why we cannot shrink? Because it don't have any backing system in it. No, there is another kind of memory called SQL Server overhead. Like SQL Server, we know as this is an executable. Some kind of things will use this executable and will run this executable. For example, there are thread stacks. So even this overhead, SQL Server overhead memory also will hold inside the memory architecture. So there is another memory called in-memory OLTP. It is also the fixed memory, and it holds the memory optimized tables, and it cannot be shrinked easily when it is in use. For example, all the objects which are inside the in-memory OLTP should be deleted first, and the clear-up process will come and clean that up so that the memory inside the in-memory OLTP will be available for the other tables to be stored. So how memory is managed? There is something known as least recently used algorithm, LRUK algorithm. The -K is for the complexity of the code we are storing in that memory. So what is this LRU? Like anything that is being stored in the memory, if it is staying there for a longer time, then it is likely to be discarded first. But in the SQL Server will choose this way. Like if, for example, if there is an execution plan which SQL Server created it very easily with less amount of cost and less amount of time, then those kind of execution plans will be discarded first. But if the execution plans are really tough and it took so much of time and resources to get created and stored in the memory, those kind of execution plans will have options to be stayed there for longer time. So there are two types of processes that will manage the memory. One is lazy writer and the ghost cleanup. Let's talk about the lazy writer in the plan cache. So for example, this diagram shows that this is the plan cache in my example, and there are 3 execution plans which I have: plan 1, plan 2, and plan 3 in my plan cache. It's really, really small. So what happens is each and every object inside the cache, like the execution plan here, will have 2 numbers on the bottom of it. The left number is called complexity code value, and the right side is called the complexity countdown value. So what happens is the lazy writer kicks in every minute by the SQL Server automatically. The lazy writer will come and check if there is any execution plan least recently used. Like in my example, none of them will be used. So lazy writer will go ahead and decrement by 1 on the complexity countdown value on the right side. So it will go ahead and decrement the plan 1 countdown value from 18 to 17. For the plan B, from the plan 2, it will change from 9 to 8. And for the plan 3, it will go ahead and change from 2 to 1. And then the lazy writer goes away. And in the next minute, it will come back again. And it will check if any of the execution plans are being used recently. So in our example, none of them will be used again. So it will go ahead and change the complexity countdown value from 17 to 16 for the plan 1. For the plan 2, it will go ahead and change from 8 to 7. And for the plan 3, it will go ahead and change from 1 to 0. Now, did you observe the plan 3, the countdown value for the plan 3 has been changed to 0. So what should happen? Now the SQL Server should go ahead and discard this plan 3 out of the cache, right? But that's not going to happen in the SQL Server. There is a process called as ghost cleanup, which will kick in every few seconds. It will check for any objects which have no countdown value, the 0 countdown value, and it will go and tag them as it will flag them as a ghosted, and then those are still existed in the cache, but they are in the half-life. They will disappear, but they are still in the plan cache. In case if there is a memory pressure, if there is no memory pressure, then the objects are stayed in the plan cache, so that if somebody else will come tomorrow and they may use the same cache, right? So, but in the case of the memory pressure, the ghost cleanup will go ahead and clean these ghosted plan caches. Next, in a minute, the lazy writer will kick back in again to see if there is any execution plan being used. In my example, here the execution plan 2 will be used now. So what will happen? Lazy writer will go ahead and change that complexity countdown value from 7 back to its original value, which is 9. That's how the plan cache works. Let's talk about the buffer pool. So what does the buffer pool holds? It holds the 8 KB pages, the data pages, and the index pages. And buffer pool, it has to manage 3 kinds of structures in it. One is heaps and clustered indexes and non-clustered indexes. So for example, if you wanted to do a select on a heap table, here's what will happen. You already know, buffer pool should go ahead and pull all the pages from those heap tables into the memory and do the select from there, or do the update or deletes from there, depending upon the depending upon the query we are sending. So if you go ahead and create clustered indexes and non-clustered indexes, buffer pool has to go very less times to the disk subsystem, to the database files, to grab those data in the form of database files and then the index files into the memory. So it has to take very few rounds to get into the disk subsystem. So indexes basically will help reduce the I/O, and indexes will also help speed up the query process. So how is this buffer pool get managed regularly? There is something known as checkpoint process will be kicked in by SQL Server automatically every few minutes, and it will go ahead and check if there are any dirty pages in the buffer pool. Now, what are these dirty pages? Dirty pages are the pages which are already modified in the buffer pool, but they did not yet return to the disk. They are not hardened to the disk. So checkpoint every few minutes, it will check for the dirty pages. And if it finds dirty pages existed in the buffer pool, it will go ahead and flush them out to the database files. So that's how the checkpoint process works, and that's how the buffer pool will manage. That's how the checkpoint process will manage the buffer pool. So now let's see how the SQL optimizer works. SQL Server Optimizer is a cost-based optimizer. It always wanted to choose the good enough plan, but not the best plan. So what is the difference? The cost and the time is the difference. Like if the optimizer can get the good enough plan in very less amount of time and with less amount of cost, then optimizer will choose that plan to process the query and to choose the execution plan based upon that. That is the reason why the optimizer is very good in the SQL Server. So in this example, let's see a select statement with 4 table join in it, and each table has a clustered index and 3 non-clustered index in it. So if at all the optimizer wanted to choose the best plan, what it does? It will go ahead and it will have to analyze all these physical access method per table. That is like 72 physical access method per table, like for example, the unordered clustered index scan, unordered non-clustered index scan. It has to go and check if there is a covering index on it. So per single table, it has to choose 72 physical access method. On the top of it, it will also have to analyze the 24 different types of logical join orders. Now, what are these? In our example, we have a 4-table join, right? So if for example, the join between A and B will be able to filter out 40% of the records from the result set, and the join between B and C will be able to filter out 90% of the records from the result set, then the join between B and C will be reordered and it will put in the front of the query, and all the rest of the joins will be put back of it. So that's how the reordering of these joins occur. And there are 24 in total just for this simple 4 join statement. And on the top of it, optimizer have to go ahead and it will have to analyze all these optimization rule. And out of total, there are about 26,000 possible plans. It will go ahead and choose to get the best plan. So it will take a lot of time and resources, right? So instead of that, what optimizer do is it will go ahead and choose the good enough plan in very less amount of time with less amount of resources, and it will use that as the execution plan for the query. And I would like to give a thank you to Kevin Klein for loaning me this example. In a very simple words, I can tell you, like, if, for example, the optimizers choose the strategy A in 3 milliseconds and the strategy B in 3.5 milliseconds, and if the optimizer have to go and analyze if strategy A is better or B is better, to do that part of analyzing, it have to take 5 seconds. Then SQL Server doesn't go over there. It will just go ahead and choose strategy A or B for creating an execution plan. So let's talk about the life cycle of a query. So if the life cycle of a query is divided into 3 different steps, the first step will have the components parser, binder, simplification, and the trivial plan. These components in the first step are very easy and lightweight on the SQL Server. They don't need any much metadata. They just need the metadata for the query and the table definitions. That's all it is. And when you go to the second step, there are the components called load metadata, join heuristics, and the search phases, 0, 1, and 2. There are 3 different search phases. These components will come under second step. In this step, the components needs most part of the metadata to process any query. And when it comes to the third step, there are access methods, transaction manager, and buffer manager components. These 3 components are very IO intensive and very resource consuming, because these 3 components comes under the storage engine. The access methods and transaction manager, buffer manager, these components will actually go ahead and pull the data from the disk subsystem, so which is very IO intensive. So these are the overview of the SQL engine. The first step components and the second step components comes under the relational engine, and the third step components will come under the storage engine. So let's talk about the simple select query example, like how the select query is processed in each and every step inside the SQL engine. For example, we have a user here who is running a select statement on the SQL Server. No matter what kind of interface he uses, he might be using SQL Server Management Studio or Azure Data Studio or .NET Visual Studio or even the third-party application. No matter what kind of interface he uses, the user first he have to get the secure network connection to the SQL Server. So how do he get that? There is something known as SQL Server Network Interface, also known as SNI. It will establish the secure network connection between the SQL Server and the user. So using the network protocol, in our case, we are using the TCP IP protocol. There are also other kinds of protocols, shared memory and named bytes. So we are using TCP IP here. So once the network connection is established, the query which the user submitted is put it in a tabular data stream packet, which is also known as TDS packet, and the SNL will give it that to the SQL operating system. So once the TDS package will come to the SQL operating system, the SQL operating system will identify that coming connection as the SQL connection, and it will assign a SPID. You know SPID, right? When you run SP2 or SP2, you will see all those SPIDs 56, 30, 56, 67. Those are all the SPIDs. So those are the SQL connections made to the SQL operating system. So at this stage, the SQL OS will unwrap the tabular data stream packet, and it will identify that query as a SQL query, and it will give back to the parser step. The parser is the first component of the relational engine. So what happens at this parser? Parser, it will identify if there are any syntactical errors. For example, if you wanted to run a select star from a table, but instead by mistake you did select star from, then at the parser stage, a parser should identify that as a syntax error, and it should throw back an error to the user. And at this parser stage, the variables are declared, like if you declare the correct variable or not in the where clause, those kind of things are checked at the parser component. And views are expanded here. The code behind the view will be gathered and put it in line in the query we are submitting. That's happens here. So what this parser does is it will push a hash on the query we are running, and it will check on the hash of the execution plan that is existed in the plan cache. If it finds the exact match of the hash for the query plan, it will go ahead and use that query plan, and it will send to the execution phase. But if at all it doesn't find any match, then it will go ahead and build the initial parse tree. And then the query is sent to the binder phase. So what happened in the binder is the binder will identify if the objects like tables and the columns are valid or not. The binder is also known as the algebraizer or normalizer. And in the binder phase, binder will check for the user permissions on the objects which we are using in our query. Data type resolution happens here. For example, if you are doing a select query and you are using two tables by using a union in it, the ordinal columns of those two tables should match in the data type. And aggregate binding happens here. That means the sum, average, those kind of things are bound here. With all this information, the binder component will go ahead and update the parse tree inside the plan cache. And the query is now sent to the simplification phase. As the name says, simplification does is it will simplify the query. Like if the query has a subquery in it, the subquery will be converted into the simple join, and it will make the query really simple. And contradiction detection happens here. Like if we run a select statement with a contradiction of like foreign key, if there is a contradiction, those kind of things are detected here. And with all this information, the query, the parse tree will be updated inside the plan cache. And the query is now sent to the trivial plan. So at this phase, if the SQL server will think that the query is very, very simple, like the select star or select star with a where clause, simple where clause, then the SQL server will think, why not I create a execution plan on the fly, the trivial plan on the fly, because it's the query which user submitted is very, very simple, and it will discard all the parse tree which we have updated in the plan cache. Until now, it will just discard all of them, and it will use that query, the trivial plan, to the execution. It will send it to the execution. If at all our trivial plan is not, if at all our select statement is not very easy, like very easy to the SQL server to create an execution plan, if it is having a complex joins, orders, and if it is a complex query, then the query will be sent to the next phase, the second step. And also I wanted to tell that trivial plans by default are not stored in the plan cache, because SQL Server doesn't want to spend the memory and space inside the plan cache for these really easy created plans. It can create on the fly. Anytime it runs, it can go ahead and create it, and it don't want to waste the space inside the plan cache. It wanted to use that space inside the plan cache for the most complicated queries. So in our case, we have given the complicated query to the SQL Server. So The query is now at the second step. The first step inside the in the second step is load metadata. The most metadata details are gathered at this phase, like the index statistics and histograms. Histograms are the structures created by the SQL Server, and they describe like how the data has been distributed in a column of the index or in the column of a table. And at this phase, the SQL Server will create the auto create statistics. Like, for example, if you're running a select statement using a where clause very frequently with the same column, then SQL Server will go ahead and create the auto statistics on it, even if that column doesn't have any index on it. So, and also at this phase, the cardinality estimates are gathered. The cardinality meaning the total number of records that are being processed at each step inside the query plan. At this phase, the SQL Server collation and Windows collation are gathered. That information is gathered, and set options are also checked. Like if you set the option like XML on or XML off, depending upon on or off, the execution plan will be changed. So with all this information, the load metadata component will go ahead and update the execution plan in the plan cache. And the query will now send to the join heuristics. So in the join heuristics, the joins, if you have a 3-table join statement, select statement, if the A to B join will filter out the 40% of the records from the result set. And if the join between B and C will filter out 90% of the records in the result set, then the SQL Server will go ahead and rejoin the join between B and C in the beginning and push the other joins later. So those kind of reorder join will happen here because it wanted to get the results as soon as possible. With all this information, the join heuristic component will now update the parse tree inside the plan cache. And now the query will go to the search phases. In the very next slide, I'm going to discuss about details of this search phases. But for now, just remember that the optimizer is a cost-based optimizer. It always wanted to choose good enough plan very quickly with less amount of resources. It will go ahead and choose from these 3 plans, phase 0, 1, and 2. And then once it chooses the execution plan for that query we are submitting, it will go ahead and finally update the plan cache, and it will also generate a hash on that plan. And now the query will be going to the storage engine. But before going into the storage engine, let's discuss about the search phases. So what are these optimizer search phases? The optimizer, to find out the good enough plan, it will go ahead and choose the execution plans from these phases. Like the phase 0 is also known as the transaction plan. These plans are created very easily by the optimizer. They are created at pre-optimization stage. For example, the trivial plans. The trivial plans are created at the pre-optimization stage. And these plans are chosen by the queries, which are very easy, very quick, very quickly. The execution plans are generated very easily. These are very small queries with maximum of 3 tables, and very basic heuristics and metadata is needed for creating these execution plans. When it comes to the phase 1 is also known as the quick plan. So the queries which have the maximum of 8 tables, those kind of queries will choose the execution plan from these phase 1. And more transformation rules are used here, more than phase 0. So what actually the phase 0 and phase 1 does is the optimizer will compare this query which we are submitting to the already existing execution plan shapes, and it will choose from them. But that's not the case with the phase 2. Phase 2 is also known as full plan. Phase 2 plans are used, execution plans are used for more complicated queries. At this phase 2, the parallelism, spills, pools to the tempdb happens, and all of the transformation rules are unlocked here. So what optimizer does is it will take the query and it will open up all the transformation rules, and it will go ahead and analyze or it will have to go ahead and analyze all the transformation rules. So instead, what it does is it will go ahead and prune off the rules which we are not using in our query. For example, if we are using nvar carmax or blob data type we are not using the blob data type and nvar carmax in our query, it will go ahead and optimizer will go ahead and prune off all these rules which are associated with nvar carmax and blob data types. So once it will prune off, it is very easy for the optimizer to go ahead and create take the execution plan, the good enough execution plan very quickly. That's how the optimizer will search these phases to get the execution plan for any query. Now let's see the read transaction. So until now, whether it might be the read transaction or write transaction or update, all the query has to pass the phase one, the step one components and the step two components, depending upon how complicated the query is. But all the difference happens at the storage engine. But the read transaction, the changes happen between the read and the write is with the transaction manager and the buffer manager. So once the query has reached the access methods, the access method operation itself, it doesn't do any operation, but it will actually analyze how it has to gather all the detail, all the data from the database pages. So the query will now send to the transaction manager. There are two components inside the transaction manager. One is log manager and the other is log manager. For the read transaction, the log manager will be invoked. We don't invoke, the transaction manager doesn't invoke the log manager because we are not making any modifications. It's a read transaction. So what transaction manager does is it will request the buffer manager to put a shared log because it's a read transaction, right? So it will request a shared log to put on the resources that the buffer manager wanted to get. Once a query has reached to the buffer manager, buffer manager, first it will put a shared lock on the resources it needs, and then it will check if those pages are already in the buffer pool that it requires. If it doesn't have the enough pages that it requires, it will go ahead and get the data from the database files in the form of 8 KB pages. Might be the index pages or the data pages. It will grab those pages into the buffer pool. It will do all the select there, and it will send the results to the query. That's how the read transaction works. Very simple. Now let's see how the write transactions work. As you know, the access methods, it will only analyze how it has to gather the data from the data pages. The query will go to the transaction manager, and now the difference is here. Both the log manager and log manager will be invoked here. First, the log manager will be invoked. So before making any data modifications inside the buffer pool, the transaction will first update all the information in the transaction log, like what it is going to be updated, all that kind of information. And once it write the information in the transaction log, then the transaction manager will request the buffer manager to put an exclusive lock because it's a write transaction. We don't want any other transactions to be interacting with my transaction here. So but it will request to put an exclusive lock. So once the query will go to the buffer manager component, the buffer manager it will put an exclusive lock on the resources it needs, and then it will go ahead and check if all the pages it needs are in the buffer pool. If it doesn't have some of the pages or all of the pages, index page or the data page, it will go ahead and get that pages into the memory, and then it will do all the modifications in the buffer pool, and it will send the success message to the user. But did you observe here? The data has been modified in the buffer pool, but it did not return to the disk, but still the results are already sent to the user as success, right? So there is a process which we discussed earlier. The checkpoint will kick in. It will check for the dirty pages in the buffer pool, and it will go ahead and write all these dirty pages into the database files. That's how the write transactions work. So let's start the demo. Let me share. Okay, sorry. So let me share my screen. Andy, can you see my screen?
Yes, everything looks great.
Awesome. So for this demo, I'm going to use the AdventureWorks 2016 database. So let's see how the parse and binder components works inside the SQL server. To know how the parser works, we have to set the parse only on, or we can directly do the parsing on this tool. But let's turn the parse only component on. So when I turn this parse only on, it will just parse the query. It doesn't execute the query, or it doesn't create the execution plan also. So let's turn this on. And let's do a very simple select statement. And see, we do not have any syntactical errors in this statement. So it executed successfully, parsed successfully, basically. So let's see how the variable declaration happens here. I did not declare the variable here, but I used that variable in the where clause and see what happens. So it should throw an error, like the variables are validated in the parser stage, right? Let's see if I select a non-existing column from a non-existing table and see how it works. It should not throw any error because that's a parser. Parser doesn't check for the objects and columns at this phase. Now let's turn the parse only off. And let's see now how binder works. Like if you set the format only option on, both the parser as well as the binder phases happens. So let's execute this. We turned it on, and I wanted to see how SQL Server will validate the objects and then the columns in this. We have all of the existing columns, so it should run fine. Like whenever I turn the format only option on, the results doesn't show up to the user and the execution plan doesn't get created. And now I wanted to do the same select non-existing column from non-existing table, but at this time the binder will kick in, right? The binder will go ahead and check as a not valid, because at this phase the tables and columns are validated. So let me turn the format only option off, and let's see how the data type resolution happens at the binder phase. In this statement, we are doing a union all between two columns, and the ordinal columns of two tables should be of the same data type. And here the customer ID, if you see, it's an integer, and the sales order ID is also an integer. So it should not create any problem. When you execute, the result should come. But if I create a data type resolution error here, in this statement, I change the columns of a different data types. So customer ID is an integer here, and the credit card approval code is a varchar. So now let's see how the binder will do this. It should throw an error saying conversion failed between varchar to the integer. So that's how the parser and binder works. Now let's see how the simplification works. Simplification and trivial plan works. So in the simplification phase, as we discussed, the simplification should simplify the query by changing the subqueries into the joins. So in this example, I'm using a simple subquery. It should turn that into a simple join. And now I wanted to enable the execution plan to see how it does. Sorry, what happened?
Your database, for some reason, your backend master.
Oh, thank you, Andy. I said, what? So when you see, it should zoom to fit in. It should say like here, it converted into join. Did you see the inner join here? So that's how the simplification works. So and next we are going to see if the unused redundant joins, how does it remove the redundant joins. So in this select statement, I am only getting the columns from a single table, the sales order header table, but there is a redundant join which we are not using, the customer table. Let's see how it works. if you see the execution plan, and see, it only gets the data from the sales order header. It did not touch any customer table. That's how the simplification works. And let's see how it identifies the contradiction. So manually, I created a contradiction by putting a where clause where territory ID is equal to 1 and where territory ID is not equal to 1. So it should create a contradiction. It should not give me any results. And now we see the trivial plan. Like, this is a very simple select statement with a where clause. Now, let's see how SQL Optimizer choose the plan, whether it will choose a full plan or a trivial plan. If at all it will choose a trivial plan, then the optimizer process will end immediately. Let's see the execution plan. When you see the properties, see the optimizer choose the trivial plan because this query is very easy. The SQL server will think like, let me go and create a trivial plan, and it won't even store in the plan cache by default. But there is an option where you can turn these trivial plans into full plans forcefully by enabling the trace flag 8757. Now I put this option. I enable the trace on for this query, and now see if the optimizer will choose the full plan. If you go to the execution plan and see the properties, see now the optimizer choose the full plan. But please do not try this on production because we do not want to change the trivial plans to full plans generally. There are always exceptions, but there is a reason why SQL Server Optimizer will always make this as a trivial plan, because these queries are really simple and doesn't take much resources to create. So every time you execute these kind of queries, SQL Server will go ahead and create the trivial plans on the fly, and they are not getting stored in the plan cache. So that's how the simplification and trivial plan works. So let me go to my my slide. So in the summary, what we have discussed in this session, we have gone through the ACID properties of transaction with a simple example, ensuring the ACID property, and we have gone through the overview of memory architecture where we discussed about the different types of memory components we have in the SQL Server, and we also gone through how the memory is actually managed, and we have gone in detail with the plan cache and buffer pool, how they are managed. And we have gone through the life cycle of the query with the select statement as well as with the insert statement. And we have gone through the components of SQL engine while we went through the life cycle of the query. That's relational engine and the storage engine. So while preparing for these presentation, I have gone through all these resources. Please look into those if you need. And my daughter Nakshatra, she's 7-year-old. She joined me to give a big thank you to Ben Weisman and William Durkin for giving me this wonderful opportunity. This is the first time ever I'm speaking for a big event like this. Thank you so much for New Stars of Data. And I wanted to give a special shout out and thank you is a very small word for Debra Melkin. She was supporting me going above and beyond. She spent so many hours. And she helped me a lot putting this all together. And thank you, Redgate, for sponsoring this wonderful event, New Stars of Data. And thank you, Andy, for helping me out and for moderating my session. And thank you a lot for each and every attendee who is making this event very successful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well done.
And thank you for that great picture.
Thank you. My daughter loved drawing.
That's a wonderful personal touch. A great way to close your presentation. Awesome.
Thank you, Andy.
So you do have 2 questions in the Q&A. So
okay.
The first question is phase 1 is optimizing queries for a maximum of 8 tables. Could this mean that if I split up complex analytical queries each to only use 8 tables, could I get better plans?
So it means that if you use the 8 tables and use a complex query.
I think the question is if, for example, the query is something like maybe 20 tables of joins and stuff like that, instead break it up into smaller, smaller things of 8 tables or less, would that help things out?
Exactly. It will definitely help, because sometimes what happens when you put a very complicated query, if the phase 2 cannot handle, it will actually throw an error to the user, like I cannot process because this is too much for me. Like if you wanted to divide the thing which you are saying, like to put it in a phase 1 phase, then that should be really helpful, because SQL Server should for the optimizer, it is very easy to get the good enough plan in the phase 1. The more complicated is the phase 2. The phase 1 and phase 0 and phase 1 are a little bit easy.
All right, very good. And the second comment and question is, just for clarification about trivial plans, you explained the queries are simple. I guess this is just regarding the data gathering, as often there is just one way of getting the data. In these cases, rather than multiple, which could be optimized. Or to put it differently, couldn't a query with a trivial plan still be one to be concerned about regarding resource usage?
So you're saying, can the trivial plan be resource intensive? Sorry, I did not understand. Can you put that
that's
in
my
simple
interpretation
way?
of this question. Yes, the asker just confirmed that. Can a trivial plan still result in high resource utilization?
That's an interesting question. But usually, trivial plans are there. We are not generating them, right? The SQL optimizer generates them. If it only finds them simple, then only it will go ahead and create the trivial plans. I don't think the complicated queries will choose the trivial plan. I don't think so. But I'm not 100% sure. There might be some cases, but no. On my research, what I did is doesn't create the complicated queries doesn't get created with a trivial plan.
Okay. That looks to be it as far as the Q&A is concerned. Any other questions from the audience? If not, here's just yet another friendly reminder to please give your speaker back a few minutes of your time and give them some constructive feedback in the evaluation. I just copied and pasted the eval URL back into the chat window. So please, give our speakers a little bit of feedback. Tell them how they can improve, and also tell them what they did well as well. So, it takes a heck of a lot of courage to present, especially for a first time with a large audience like this. So, Deepthi, well done.
Thank you.
And yes, you're most welcome. I'm just waiting to see if there's any other questions that come trickling on in. Otherwise, I think we can kind of start transitioning on over. So, yeah. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any other questions. So, all right, well, time to go relax and take the rest of Friday off. You've done your job.